Section 19 of The Blue Castle by Lucy Maud Montgomery. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 36. Finally Valancy went to bed. Before she went, she reread Dr. Trent's letter. It comforted her a little. So positive, so assured. The writing so black and steady. Not the writing of a man who didn't know what he was writing about. But she could not sleep. She pretended to be asleep when Barney came in. Barney pretended to go to sleep. But Valancy knew perfectly well he wasn't sleeping any more than she was. She knew he was lying there, staring through the darkness, thinking of what? Trying to face what? Valancy, who had spent so many happy wakeful hours of night lying by that window, now paid the price of them all in this one night of misery. A horrible, portentous fact was slowly looming out before her from the nebula of surmise and fear. She could not shut her eyes to it, push it away, ignore it. There could be nothing seriously wrong with her heart, no matter what Dr. Trent had said. If there had been, those 30 seconds would have killed her. It was no use to recall Dr. Trent's letter and refutation. The greatest specialists made mistakes sometimes. Dr. Trent had made one. Towards morning, Valancy fell into a fitful doze with ridiculous dreams. One of them was of Barney taunting her with having tricked him. In a dream, she lost her temper and struck him violently on the head with her rolling pin. He proved to be made of glass and shivered into splinters all over the floor. She woke with a cry of horror, a gasp of relief, a short laugh over the absurdity of her dream, a miserable, sickening recollection of what had happened. Barney was gone. Valancy knew, as people sometimes know things, inescapably, without being told, that he was not in the house or in Bluebeard's chamber either. There was a curious silence in the living room, a silence with something uncanny about it. The old clock had stopped. Barney must have forgotten to wind it up, something he had never done before. The room without it was dead, though the sunshine streamed in through the oriel, and dimples of light from the dancing waves beyond quivered over the walls. The canoe was gone, but Lady Jane was under the mainland trees. So Barney had betaken himself to the wilds. He would not return till night, perhaps not even then. He must be angry with her. That furious silence of his must mean anger, cold, deep, justifiable resentment. Well, Valancy knew what she must do first. She was not suffering very keenly now, yet the curious numbness that pervaded her being was in a way worse than pain. It was as if something in her had died. She forced herself to cook and eat a little breakfast. Mechanically, she put the Blue Castle in perfect order. Then she put on her hat and coat, locked the door, and hid the key in the hollow of the old pine, and crossed to the mainland in the motorboat. She was going into Deerwood to see Dr. Trent. She must know. Chapter 37. Dr. Trent looked at her blankly and fumbled among his recollections. Mrs. Snaith, said Valancy quietly. I was Miss Valancy Sterling when I came to you last May, over a year ago. I wanted to consult you about my heart. Dr. Trent's face cleared. Ah, of course. I remember now. I'm really not to blame for not knowing you. You've changed splendidly, and married. Well, it has agreed with you. You don't look much like an invalid now, eh? I remember that day. I was badly upset, hearing about poor Ned bowled me over. But Ned's as good as new now, and you too, evidently. I told you so, you know. Told you there was nothing to worry over. Valancy looked at him. You told me, in your letter, she said slowly, with a curious feeling that someone else was talking through her lips, that I had angina pectoris in the last stages, complicated with an aneurysm, that I might die any minute, that I couldn't live longer than a year. Dr. Trent stared at her. "Impossible," he said blankly. "I couldn't have told you that." Valancy took his letter from her bag and handed it to him. "Miss Valancy Sterling," he read. Yes, of course I wrote to you on the train that night, but I told you there was nothing serious." "Read your letter," insisted Valancy. Dr. Trent took it out, unfolded it, glanced over it. A dismayed look came into his face. He jumped to his feet and strode agitatedly about the room. "Good heavens! This is the letter I meant for old Miss Jane Sterling from Port Lawrence. She was here that day too. I sent you the wrong letter. What unpardonable carelessness! But I was beside myself that night. My God! And you believed that? You believed... But you didn't. You went to another doctor." Valancy stood up, turned round, looked foolishly about her and sat down again. "I believed it," she said faintly. "I didn't go to any other doctor. It would take too long to explain, but I believed I was going to die soon." Dr. Trent halted before her. "I can never forgive myself. What a year you must have had. But you don't look... I can't understand." "Never mind," said Valancy dully. "And so there's nothing the matter with my heart?" "Well, nothing serious. You had what's called pseudo-angina. It's never fatal. Passes away completely with proper treatment, or sometimes with a shock of joy. Have you been troubled much with it?" "Not at all since March," answered Valancy. She remembered the marvellous feeling of recreation she had had when she saw Barney coming home safe after the storm. Had that shock of joy cured her? "Then likely you're all right. I told you what to do in the letter you should have got, and, of course, I supposed you'd go to another doctor." "Child, why didn't you?" "I didn't want anybody to know." "Idiot," said Dr. Trent bluntly. "I can't understand such folly. And poor old Miss Sterling, she must have got your letter telling her there was nothing serious the matter." Well, it couldn't have made any difference. Her case was hopeless. Nothing that she could have done or left undone could have made any difference. I was surprised she lived as long as she did. 2 months. She was here that day, not long before you. I hated to tell her the truth. You think I'm a blunt old curmudgeon, and my letters are blunt enough. I can't soften things, but I'm a snivelling coward when it comes to telling a woman face to face that she's got to die soon. I told her I'd look up some features of the case I wasn't quite sure of, and let her know the next day. But you got her letter. Look here. Dear Miss Sterling. Yes, I noticed that, but I thought it a mistake. I didn't know there were any Sterlings in Port Lawrence. She was the only one. A lonely old soul. Lived by herself with only a little home girl. She died 2 months after she was here. Died in her sleep. My mistake couldn't have made any difference to her. But you... I can't forgive myself for inflicting a year's misery on you. It's time I retired all right when I do things like that, even if my son was supposed to be fatally injured. Can you ever forgive me?" A year of misery. Valancy smiled a tortured smile as she thought of all the happiness Dr. Trent's mistake had brought her. But she was paying for it now. Oh, she was paying. If to feel was to live, she was living with a vengeance. She let Dr. Trent examine her and answered all his questions. When he told her she was fit as a fiddle and would probably live to be 100, she got up and went away silently. She knew that there were a great many horrible things outside waiting to be thought over. Dr. Trent thought she was odd. Anybody would have thought, from her hopeless eyes and woe-begone face, that he had given her a sentence of death instead of life. Snaith? Snaith? Who the devil had she married? He'd never heard of Snaiths in Deerwood. And she'd been such a sallow, faded little old maid. Gad, but marriage had made a difference in her anyhow, whoever Snaith was. Snaith? Dr. Trent remembered. That rapscallion up back. Had Valancy Sterling married him? And her clan letter? Well, probably that solved the mystery. She had married in haste and repented at leisure. and that was why she wasn't overjoyed at learning she was a good insurance prospect. After all, married to God knew whom, or what? Jailbird? Defaulter? Fugitive from justice? It must be pretty bad if she had looked to death as a release, poor girl. But why were women such fools? Dr. Trent dismissed Vallancey from his mind, though to the day of his death he was ashamed of putting those letters into the wrong envelopes. End of section 19. Read by Bryn Roberts.